Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something quite specific, maybe a bit unexpected.
Mm-hmm. It's this connection our sources highlight between, well, cannabis use and these quite strange feelings of unreality.
Right, feelings like depersonalization or
Mm.
derealization, where you feel sort of detached, maybe from yourself
Mm.
or the world just seems off.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And, it's worth saying that brief moments like that, pretty common actually. Most people might feel a bit disconnected now and then.
Okay, yeah, fleeting feelings.
But what we're digging into here based on the sources is when these feelings don't go away, when they become persistent, lasting for weeks, maybe even months.
And really start impacting your life.
Precisely. That's the focus.
So this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The sources flag that while lots of things can potentially trigger these chronic states,
Mm.
cannabis, so marijuana or hashish, actually stands out quite a bit.
Yeah, it's cited as like the most common trigger. The figure mentioned is around 30% of cases of this ongoing alienation feeling.
30%.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big chunk, isn't it? Might surprise some people.
It really might. And what's particularly striking from the material is that this isn't just about, say, long-term or really heavy use.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the information suggests that for some individuals, even just using it once can be enough to set off these persistent feelings.
Wow. Okay. So a single instance. That raises some big questions, doesn't it? Like why some people and not others?
It certainly does. It challenges that maybe common assumption that you only run these kinds of risks with frequent or heavy use.
Right. Now, the sources are also clear, though, that we don't fully understand why this link exists, the exact reasons.
Yeah,
They're a bit murky.
that's true. It's not fully mapped out. There is one idea proposed, though.
Okay.
It centers on the fact that, well, cannabis use tends to be more common among younger people, right? Teenagers, young adults. And their brains are still developing quite significantly during that time. So the theory kind of suggests that maybe cannabis use during these critical developmental windows could interfere somehow.
To interfere with brain development.
Mm-hmm.
And that could increase vulnerability to these feelings of unreality.
That's the hypothesis, yeah. But it's really important, like the sources stress, to remember this is a theory. It's one possible explanation, but the mechanisms aren't pinned down. Still needs research.
Okay, got it. So it's a potential factor, but not definitive. Given this connection, then, this surprising link, what's the advice coming out of the sources?
Well, the main takeaway, and it's pretty strong advice, is if you're already experiencing depersonalization or derealization,
Yeah.
then using marijuana or hashish is really not recommended. The logic being, if it can trigger these feelings, using it more could understandably make them worse or last longer.
Makes sense. Avoid something that might be contributing. And this is interesting, too. The sources specifically mention feelings of guilt.
Yes. This is a fascinating point. For someone who develops these feelings after using cannabis, it seems natural to feel, well, responsible, maybe even guilty.
Uh-huh. Like, I did this to myself.
Exactly. But the sources really emphasize moving past that self-blame. They actually use the word irrelevant. Dwelling on the guilt is seen as irrelevant to actually managing and hopefully overcoming the symptoms.
Because so blaming yourself doesn't help you get better. The focus needs to shift.
Right. Shift away from getting stuck on the why or the whose fault and towards, well, proactive solutions. What can you do?
And the sources do point towards helpful approaches.
They do. The information highlights things like self-help techniques, various strategies you can learn yourself, and also psychotherapy, seeing a professional.
As valuable resources, right? Not about blame, but about support.
Precisely. It's about empowering you, giving you tools and strategies to navigate these feelings, manage them, and ideally reduce them over time.
Okay, so let's recap quickly. Cannabis, maybe surprisingly for some, emerges as a major trigger for these chronic feelings of unreality. Depersonalization, derealization.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes even after just one use, which is key.
Right. And while we don't know the exact why, one theory involves brain development in younger users, but it's still just a theory.
And crucially, the advice is clear. If you're already experiencing these feelings, avoid cannabis as it could worsen things, and try not to get stuck on guilt.
Yeah, focus on managing the symptoms with things like self-help or therapy.
So if we pull back and think about the bigger picture here, what does this all suggest?
So on.
Well, consider that fact again. Even a single instance could potentially lead to these chronic symptoms for some people. What does that tell us about, how different triggers work for altered states?
And how differently individuals react.
Exactly. Individual susceptibility seems huge here. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the very complex, maybe quite delicate interplay between substances we might use, external events, internal states, and our fundamental perception of reality itself.
A lot to consider there about triggers and just how varied our responses can be. Makes you think.